Hello, class. We're going to talk about Module 2 business processes. So, we're going to learn the following after we complete this module. First is to define business process, describe the process of managing business process documentation, identify the different systems needed to support business processes in an organization, outline the components of an enterprise resource planning system, explain the value of an enterprise resource planning system, explain how business process management and business process reengineering work, describe how information technology combined with the business processes can bring an organization competitive advantage, explain ISO certification for best practices in business processes. So first, um, the fourth component of information systems is process. But what is process and how does it tie into information systems? And in what ways do processes have a role in business? So, this module will look to answer those questions and also describe how business processes can be used for strategic advantage. So, what is business process? A business process, therefore, is a process that is focused on achieving a goal for a business. If you have worked in business setting, you have participated in a business process. Anything from a simple process for making a sandwich at the subway to building a space shuttle utilizes one or more business processes. Processes are something that businesses go through every day in order to accomplish their mission. The better their processes, the more effective the business will be. Some businesses see their processes as a strategy for achieving competitive advantage. A process that achieves a goal in a unique way can set a company apart. A process that eliminates costs can allow a company to lower its prices or retain more profit. So every day, each one of us will conduct many processes without even thinking about them. Getting ready to work, using an ATM, reading our email, and other things. But as processes grow more complex, they need to be documented. For businesses, it is essential to do this because it allows them to ensure control over how activities are undertaken in their organization. It also allows for standardization. McDonald's has the same process for building a Big Mac in all of their restaurants. The simplest way to document a process is to simply create the list. The list shows each step in the process. Each step can be checked off upon completion. For example, a simple process such as how to create an account on eBay might look like this. First is that you go to eBay, click register, enter your contact information in tell us about you box, choose your ID, user ID and password, and you need to agree to the user agreement and privacy policy by clicking your on submit. That's why I introduced you how to use your Trello because your Trello also have a checklist, a diagram documentation. For processes that are not too straightforward, documenting the process as a checklist may not be sufficient. For example, here's a process for determining if an article for a term needs to be added to Wikipedia. So search Wikipedia to determine if the term already exists. If the term is found, then an article is already written. So you must think of another term. Then you go to number one. So again, if it's not found, then look to see if there is a related term. If there is a related term, then create a redirect. If there is not a related item, then create a new article. This procedure is relatively simple. In fact, it has the same number of steps as the previous example, but because it has some decision points, it is very difficult to track with a simple list. In these cases, it may make more sense to use a diagram to document the process. So we need to search for Wikipedia term. If it's found, then look for another term, then go back to search. Search for another term. Is it found? If no, is there a related term? If yes, we can create a redirect. If the term don't have a related one, create a new article. Managing business process documentation. As organizations begin to document their processes, it becomes an administrative task to keep track of them. As processes change and improve, it is important to know which processes are the most recent. It is also important to manage the process so that it can be easily updated. The requirement to manage process documentation has been one of the driving forces behind the creation of the document management system. A document management system stores and tracks documents and supports the following functions. First, versions and timestamps. The document management system will keep multiple versions of documents. The most recent version of the document is easily identified and will serve up by default approvals, and workflows. When a process needs to be changed, the system will manage both access to the documents for editing and the routing of the documents for approval. Communications. When a process changes, those who implement the process need to be made aware of the changes. A document management system will notify the appropriate people when a change to a document is approved. ERP systems. An ERP or Enterprise Resource Planning system is a software application with a centralized database. It can be used to run the entire company. Let's take a closer look at the definition of each of these components. A software application. The system is a software application, which means that it has been developed with specific logic and rules behind it. It has to be installed and configured to work specifically for an individual organization. With a centralized database, all the data in an ERP system is stored in a single centralized database. This centralization is key to the success of an ERP. Data entered in one part of the company can be immediately available to the other parts of the company. That can be used to run an entire company. An ERP can be used to manage an entire organization's operations if they so wish. Companies can purchase modules for an ERP that represent different functions within the organization, such as finance, manufacturing, and sales. ERP systems diagram. An ERP system not only centralizes an organization's data, but the processes it enforces are the processes the organizations adopt. When an ERP vendor design a module, it has to implement the rules for the associated business processes. A selling point of an ERP system is that it has best practices built right into it. In other words, when an organization implements an ERP, it also gets improved best practices as part of the deal. ERP implementation. For many organizations, the implementation of an ERP system is an excellent opportunity to improve their business processes or business practices and upgrade their software at the same time. But for others, an ERP brings them a challenge. Is the process embedded in the ERP really better than the process they are currently utilizing? If they implement this ERP and it happens to be the same one that all of all of their competitors have, will they simply become more like them, making it much more difficult to differentiate themselves? Business process management. Organizations that are serious about improving their business processes will also create structures to manage those processes. Business process management can be thought of as an intentional effort to plan, document, implement, and distribute an organization's business processes with the support of information technology. BPM is more than just automating some simple steps. While automation can make a business more efficient, it cannot be used to provide a competitive advantage. BPM, on the other hand, can be an integral part of creating that advantage. Not all of an organization's processes should be managed this way. An organization should look for processes that are essential to the functioning of the business and those that may be used to bring a competitive advantage. The best practices to look at are those that include employees from multiple departments, those that require decision making that cannot be easily automated, and processes that change based on circumstances. To make this clear, let's take a look at an example. Suppose a large clothing retailer is looking to gain a competitive advantage through superior customer service. As part of this, they create a task force to develop a state of the art returns policy that allows customer to return any article of clothing, no questions asked. The organization also decides that in order to protect the competitive advantage that this return policy will bring, they will develop their own customization to their ERP system to implement this return policy. As they prepare to roll out the system, they invest in training for all of their customer service employees, showing them how to use the new system and specifically how to process returns. Once the updated returns process is implemented, the organization will be able to measure several key indicators about the returns that will allow them to adjust the policy as needed. For example, if they find that many women are returning their high end dresses after wearing them on, they could implement a change to the process that limits to say 14 days the time after the original purchase that an item can be returned. If done properly, business process management will provide several key benefits to an organization, which can be used to contribute to competitive advantage. These benefits include empowering employees. When a business process is designed correctly and supported with information technology, employees will be able to implement it on their own. In our returns policy example, an employee would be able to return or to accept returns made before 14 days or use the system to make determination on what returns would be allowed after 14 days. Built-in reporting. By building measurement into programming, the organization can keep up to date on key metrics regarding their processes. In our example, these can be used to improve the returns process and also ideally to reduce the returns. Enforcing best practices. As an organization implements processes supported by information systems, it can work to implement the best practices for that class of business process. In our example, the organization may want to require that all customers returning a product without a receipt show a legal ID. This requirement can be built into the system so that the return will not be processed unless a valid ID number is entered. Enforcing consistency. By creating a process and enforcing it with information technology, it is possible to create a consistency across the entire organization. In our example, all stores in the retail chain can enforce the same returns policy. And if the returns policy changes, the change can be instantly enforced across the entire chain. Business process reengineering. As organizations look to manage their processes to gain a competitive advantage, they also need to understand that their existing ways of doing things may not be the most effective or efficient. A process developed in 1950s is not going to be better because it is now supported by technology. In 1990, Michael Hammer published an article in Harvard Business Review entitled Reengineering Work. Don't Automate, Obliterate. This article put forward the thought that simply automating a bad process does not make it better. Companies should blow up their existing processes and develop new processes that take advantage of the new technologies in concept. He states in the introduction of the article many of our job designs, workflows, control mechanism, and organizational structure came of age in different competitive environment and before the advent of the computer. They are geared toward greater efficiency and control. Yet, the watchword of the new decade are innovation and speed, services, and quality. Business process reengineering guidelines. Business process engineering is not just taking an existing process and automating it. BPR is fully understanding the goals of a process and then dramatically redesign it from the ground up to achieve dramatic improvements in productivity and quality. But this is easier said than done. Most of us think in terms of how do small local improvements to a process. Complete redesign requires thinking on the larger scale. Hammer provides some guidelines for how to go about doing business process reengineering. Organize around outcomes, not tasks. This simply means to design the process so that, if possible, one person performs all the steps instead of repeating one step in a process over and over. The person stays involved in the process from start to finish. Have those who use the outcome of the process perform the process. Using information technology, many simple tasks are now automated. We can empower the person who needs the outcome of the process to perform it. The example Hammer gives here is purchasing. Instead of having every department in the company use a purchasing department to order supplies, have the supplies ordered directly by those who need the supplies using information system. Treat geographically, disperse resources as though they were centralized. With the communication technology in place, it becomes easier than ever not to worry about physical location. A multinational organization does not need separate support departments for each location anymore. Link parallel activities instead of integrating their results. Departments that work in parallel should be sharing data and communicating with each other during their activities instead of waiting until each group is done and then comparing notes. Put the decision points where the work is performed and build controls into the process. The people who do the work should have decision making authority, and the process itself should have built in controls using information technology. Capture information once at the source, requiring information to be entered more than once causes delays and errors. With information technology, an organization can capture it once and then make it available whenever needed. These principles may seem like common sense today, but in 1990 they took the business world by storm. Hammer gives example by after example of how organizations improve their business processes by many orders of magnitude without adding any new employees, simply by changing how they did things. Unfortunately, business process reengineering got a bad name in many organizations. This was because it was used as an excuse for cost cutting that really had nothing to do with BPR. For example, many companies simply use it as an excuse for laying off part of their workforce. Today, however, many of the principles of BPR have been integrated into businesses and are considered part of good business process management. Reengineering a college bookstore. The process of purchasing the correct textbooks in a timely manner for college classes has always been problematic. And now, with online bookstores such as Amazon competing directly with the college bookstore for students' purchases, the college bookstore is under pressure to justify its existence. But college bookstores have one big advantage over their competitors. They have access to students' data. In other words, once a student has registered for classes, the bookstore knows exactly what books that the student will need for the upcoming term. To leverage this advantage and to take advantage of new technologies, the bookstore wants to implement a new process that will make purchasing books through the bookstore advantageous to students. The goal of the process redesign is simple: capture a higher percentage of students as customers of the bookstore. After diagramming the existing process and meeting with students' focus group, the bookstore comes up with a new process. In the new process, the bookstore utilizes information technology to reduce the amount of work the students need to do in order to get their books. In this new process, the bookstore sends the student an email with a list of all the books required for their upcoming classes. By clicking the link in this email, the student can log into the bookstore, confirm their books, and purchase the books. The bookstore will then deliver the books to the students. As you notice, the process now is simplified compared to the existing one. It is now easier and you will be able to capture a higher percentage of students that will use their book, and for the benefit of the students, it will be delivered to them. ISO certification. Many organizations now claim that they are using best practices when it comes to business processes in order to set them apart and prove to their customers that they are indeed doing this. These organizations are seeking out an ISO 9000 certification. ISO is an acronym for International Standards Organization. This body defines quality standards that organizations can implement to show that they are indeed managing business processes in an effective way. The ISO 9000 certification is focused on quality management. A business process is a process that is focused on achieving a goal for business. It involves a series tasks that are completed in order to accomplish the goal. As processes grow more complex, they need to be documented to ensure control over how activities are undertaken in their organization, allowing for standardization. An enterprise resource planning system is a software application with a centralized database that can be used to run an entire company. An ERP system not only centralizes an organization's data, but the processes it enforces are the processes that organizations adopt. Here are various ERP vendors. Some of the best known ERP vendors are SAP, Microsoft, and Oracle. Business process management can be thought of as an intentional effort to plan, document, implement, and distribute an organization's business processes with the support of information technology. Business process reengineering is fully understanding the goals of a process and then dramatically redesign it from ground up to achieve dramatic improvements in productivity and quality. International Standards Organization is a body that defines quality standards that organizations can implement to show that they are indeed managing business processes in an effective way. The ISO 9000 certification is focused on quality management. In order to receive ISO certification, an organization must be audited and found to meet specific criteria. So, thank you for listening, and we will be ready for the next topic, Module 3, the people in information system.